but your reality is totally different. Make sure that you are not undermining their emotions.
How come you don't want me, man?
At the slightest adversity that they face in life.
Life is a series of choices.
I don't know when this whole spectacle will end, but it surely causes a lot of people to feel down. So it's a great opportunity for us to talk about depression and different ways to feel depressed and how we can tackle this problem. Depression is a people sickness, and until you learn the underlying causes to why you feel depressed, no matter how you treat the symptoms, this will keep coming back at you again and again and again. I have a short video on depression. Let's see what we can get out of this.
Depression is the leading cause of disability in the world. In the United States, close to 10% of adults struggle with depression. But because it's a mental illness, it can be a lot harder to understand than, say, high cholesterol. One major source of confusion is the difference between having depression and just feeling depressed.
Most people go through the feeling of being depressed. Having a depression as a clinical disorder is caused by hormonal and other genetic imbalances. This feeling of depression is a really dark corner where you get yourself into and you don't know how to get out of it, and it becomes a downward spiral when the less you do, the less actions you take, the more depressed you feel, and so on and so on.
Almost everyone feels down from time to time. Getting a bad grade, losing a job, having an argument, even a rainy day can bring on feelings of sadness. Sometimes there's no trigger at all. It just pops up out of the blue. Then circumstances change, and those sad feelings disappear.
Many people, especially young ones, feel depressed because they are lost in life, don't have any direction. This is correlated to the feeling of internal clash, where your mind wants one thing, imagines one thing, but your reality is totally different, and it doesn't reflect that projection that you have onto the world. So when your imagination, your thought processes are clashing, not cooperating with the reality, you become depressed. And what's the solution? We'll get to that.
Clinical depression is different. It's a medical disorder, and it won't go away just because you want it to. It lingers for at least 2 consecutive weeks and significantly interferes with one's ability to work, play, or love. Depression can have a lot of different symptoms: a low mood, loss of interest in things you'd normally enjoy, changes in appetite, feeling worthless or excessively guilty, sleeping either too much or too little, poor concentration, restlessness or slowness, loss of energy, or recurrent thoughts of suicide.
Very roughly simplified, depression can be a consequence of you clinging to the past, something from the past that is echoing, but you don't know what it is because you haven't had the time to rationalize and intellectualize those emotions. But as we know, if you don't feel emotions, they won't disappear, so they are lingering on in the back of your head, not letting you to breathe freely. As those emotions pile up and you neglect them, unknowingly, subconsciously, they become bigger and bigger until they explode, and that's why you get into clinical depression, where this burden becomes too heavy to handle. So your body tries to shut off because you didn't have the courage or responsibility to do it yourself. Clinical depression, as though it's not something that you control with your mind, but it can be a consequence of perpetual emotional damage. Like having a bad form in a gym. You won't notice anything from one week to another, but across a long period of time, your muscles and joints will wear off and you will feel excruciating pain. Your body shuts down.
If you have at least 5 of those symptoms, according to psychiatric guidelines, you qualify for a diagnosis of depression. And it's not just behavioral symptoms. Depression has physical manifestations inside the brain. First of all, there are changes that could be seen with the naked eye and X-ray vision. These include smaller frontal lobes and hippocampal volumes.
Although he says that it's a physical manifestation, your mind is a very powerful thing. You have to understand that your psyche can convince you into believing stuff, and what you believe becomes your reality. And as you do that, your body assumes a chemical composition, which is the consequence of the feedback that you get from your surrounding. Your thought processes, your behavior, over time becomes your reality, and it changes chemical reactions that happen in your head.
On a more micro scale, depression is associated with a few things: the abnormal transmission or depletion of certain neurotransmitters, especially serotonin, norepinephrine, and dopamine, blunted circadian rhythms, or specific changes in the REM and slow wave parts of your sleep cycle, and hormone abnormalities, such as high cortisol and deregulation of thyroid hormones.
As he said, these hormones are a consequence of how we think and view the world. Like, you can be grateful for the small things that you have in your life, but at the same time, you can have a lot of material stuff and possessions, but be ungrateful and very resentful. So your mind, in a way, controls the kind of reactions that happen in your brain. Your mind and your brain are not the same. If you're a very negative person, whining, complaining, always blaming things outside of yourself, it creates a rush of negative feelings, and our mental illnesses are a response to those feelings over a long period of time. It pushes you to back off, relax, and take care of those emotions. That's why your body shuts down, so you can take your time to deal with your shit.
But neuroscientists still don't have a complete picture of what causes depression. It seems to have to do with a complex interaction between genes and environment, but we don't have a diagnostic tool that can accurately predict where or when it will show up. And because depression's symptoms are intangible, it's hard to know who might look fine but is actually struggling.
Environment plays a huge role in depression and feeling depressed, especially in this era that we live in, where we're very interconnected with other people in a digital form. And it's really sad that our perception of the world and what kind of life that we're living is formed digitally. You can count all interaction every day that you have with people in reality on your hand, but your perception of your lifestyle and your life situation is much more grandiose than the feedback that you get from those real life interactions. Like the exact feeling that everything is going to hell with the situation that we have going on in the world, because we consume a lot of news and information from the digital space. People say one thing, governments say another thing, and our mind gets bombarded with all of this informational flow. Slowly but surely we get to view everything in a negative way, and you bet your sweet ass that will cause depression. Keep your environment very tidy and filter the kind of information that you let inside of your mind.
According to the National Institute of Mental Health, it takes the average person suffering with a mental illness over 10 years to ask for help. But there are very effective treatments. Medications and therapy complement each other to boost brain chemicals. In extreme cases, electroconvulsive therapy, which is like a controlled seizure in the patient's brain, is also very helpful. Other promising treatments, like transcranial magnetic stimulation, are being investigated too.
Truth be told, I don't believe in those kind of treatments. Maybe they are the last resort, I get it. But at the end of the day, it's all about erasing the symptoms. Same goes for medication. You're just blunting your emotions, blunting your sensations. Your problems don't disappear. They will always be in your subconscious mind. They will haunt you like the ghost of the past until you learn to understand them, to deal with them, to be okay with them, to make amends. In some cases, of course, when the situation is too dire, yes, of course, you could use medication, but those medications also handicap you as a human being. You lose your sense of self. If you cannot be depressed, you surely won't feel happy. Those are two sides of the same coin. You have to be cognizant that this is all about self-awareness and getting to know yourself. Don't outsource your mental health and well-being to other people. It will take time to understand your deepest, darkest secrets, but it's well worth the time, because you will have those tools with you till the rest of your life.
So if you know someone struggling with depression, encourage them, gently, to seek out some of these options. You might even offer to help with specific tasks, like looking up therapists in the area or making a list of questions to ask a doctor. To someone with depression, these first steps can seem insurmountable.
It's really sad that people cannot admit to themselves, first and foremost, that they're depressed. When you hear from someone else that there's nothing to be ashamed of, you feel even more guilt, because it implies that they're above you, let you know that your emotions are okay. They are approving you. It becomes this double-edged sword. But really, if a person feels ashamed to admit himself, there has to be a lot of other problems, like low self-esteem. I'm not trying to pat myself on my back, but when I was depressed, I didn't care about how people perceived me. I just wanted to get rid of that feeling of not being whole, not being myself, whatever it takes.
If they feel guilty or ashamed, point out that depression is a medical condition, just like asthma or diabetes. It's not a weakness or a personality trait, and they shouldn't expect themselves to just get over it, any more than they could will themselves to get over a broken arm. If you haven't experienced depression yourself, avoid comparing it to times you've felt down. Comparing what they're experiencing to normal temporary feelings of sadness can make them feel guilty for struggling.
Yes, depression acts like sickness as any other. You have to give it a time, put an active effort to understand it, to tackle it, to handle it. It's not about getting positive thoughts in your head and expecting for depression to pass over. The first step is to embrace it and tell yourself that it's okay, that there's nothing wrong with you. It's just a period of your life where you have to feel a little bit down so that you can appreciate the moments of high. The gratitude for life is found in contrasts. Also, I don't totally agree that you shouldn't compare the moments when you felt sad to something that they're experiencing, because we people are connecting and bonding in similar experiences. Just try to make sure that you are not undermining their emotions.
How come you don't want me, man?
The process, the feelings that they're going through. Dependent on the person, sometimes you have to give tough love because it's easy to wallow in that misery and feel pity for yourself. And we need someone else outside of us who can kick us in the ass and give some pragmatic guidance.
Even just talking about depression openly can help. For example, research shows that asking someone about suicidal thoughts actually reduces their suicide risk. Open conversations about mental illness help erode stigma and make it easier for people to ask for help. And the more patients seek treatment, the more scientists will learn about depression, and the better the treatments will get.
Talking about their own emotional problems makes people to relax, to be acceptable towards themselves. But there's also another problem that comes with that. People can become too soft and blame on a supposed depression at the slightest adversity that they face in life.
Life is a series of choices. The oldest is choosing to be a victim or choosing not to.
We should reach out to each other and help to go through these moments, but also there has to be a healthy distance between people, because some of us prefer to deal with the depression on our own. And in my opinion, the best way to deal with the depression, feeling depressed, is to take action. Because as I said previously, there's a clash in your mind between wanting something and not having it. And this is a part of our personal growth, where we want to arrive at a certain destination, but we don't do anything to go there. And taking action towards your own wishes and goals will surely make you lose that depression. Not trying to avoid it, but push through it despite it. Although clinical help might be of use, my perception is that you have to learn about your own body and mind in order to get rid of that problem once and for all. If you lack self-esteem opening up about depression or want to know more about your mental state, click one of these videos. Tell me in the commentary section how you dealt with your depression. But for now, Hossein out.